Today is March 13th. Tomorrow's Pi Day.
Can we have our pie and eat it too?
There you go. Anyways, we're going to push through the agenda today because the most valuable member of this organization has a concert to go to. We need to get her out of here before 6:15, so. Michael, you're the first on the agenda.
Thank you. I'm going to hand these out first.
Okay, and make sure you identify yourself before you start. I mean, hand out, but then when you get back up there.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a retired engineer. I am an expert at denitrification. I built the first denitrified septic system in Massachusetts, and boy, was I punished. So in any case, I'm here tonight to talk about the attenuation of dissolved nitrogen in the groundwater, because there's been some recent articles that attenuation doesn't exist. But it does exist. And what I'm going to do is now is give you some handouts. No, I have more than...
That's okay. We have a,
There may be
make sure that everybody gets
There may
one.
be enough interest among this group too.
The kid's supposed to be in this place.
I know it, because that had just
He
been
runs late.
It's that electric truck of his.
So-
It doesn't work good. He's got one of those.
You didn't get that, right? Okay. And you, is there only one of these? Okay.
The attenuation of total nitrogen in the groundwater does exist. And the most important thing is that we are a community of scientists as well as engineers, and I would refer you to, I gave you a handout of several pages, and the second one shows what's called the Redfield ratio of the soil bacteria. We all know there's a Redfield lab in Woods Hole, and Dr. Redfield identified, maybe, I'm not sure, but it's decades ago, that there was a consistent carbon to nitrogen to phosphorus ratio in the microorganisms floating in the upper meter of the ocean, and it depended on that the numerical values depended upon the climate. There are two soil scientists named, one was Cleveland, the other one was named Lipskin, and they identified that in our particular climate, the soil microisms have a consistent Redfield ratio of 60 carbon to 7 nitrogen to 1 phosphorus. Those are the soil bacteria that are attached to the sand particles in the vadal zone and also in the sand that's in the groundwater. And so those values do, they can vary rather, but that's the mean of that number. So 60 carbon to 7 nitrogen, 1 phosphorus. So the point of bringing this up is that it's pretty easy to understand how attenuation exists. If you discharge more carbon than nitrogen, you'll get attenuation. I've proved that at the Country Club at Cape Cod. The Country Club at Cape Cod discharges very low concentrations of total nitrogen. It's between 2 and 4. We've had a couple of nonconformities, but anybody dealing with wastewater knows there's going to be a couple of nonconformities. It's easy to happen. So in any case, that's a good demonstration, because what I've done is you have to be very careful in Massachusetts about the final discharge, because they use a thing called 5-day biochemical oxygen demand, total nitrogen and total phosphorus. And so if you follow what goes on with the red fill ratio. If you try to discharge that exact ratio, you'll end up with nonconformities because of the constituents biochemical oxygen demand. 5-day BOD is, as far as I'm concerned, inappropriate for discharge of wastewater into soils. It evolved somewhere between 1890 and 1910 in Great Britain, and it was evolved because the average detention time in the rivers that drained into the English Channel was 5 days. So sometimes you have to shake your head and say, why haven't they updated that? But they haven't. I say we should be measuring total organic carbon, and if you match the total organic carbon to the red fill ratio, you will get denitrification. And at the Cape Club, what I did was I actually added an extra step. I have a traditional rock, but after the traditional rock system, I added another small rock filter. And so I've actually proved that adjusting the water dose to that rock's, the smaller rock filter that's in line, I did get reductions, and that's why the performance is 2 to 4. So I just wanted to make sure that there's been some recent talk about attenuation doesn't exist, but it does exist. And all you have to do is, in my report on residential rock systems, I identify how much is dosed, and then I identified how much comes out of the bottom of a rock filter. A rock filter is nothing more than a stratified sand filter, and we pressure dose it. And you lose over 20%. So right then and there, below a septic system, there should be a reduction of about 20%. There may be less because the rock filters are pressure dosed, but which means the water's pumped on top. So the bottom line is that I wanted to make sure you understood that attenuation exists. It can be induced, and so. And as I said, the attenuation at the Cape Club is induced. The other thing that goes on is that I identified that the actual total nitrogen in the raw effluent is 140% higher than assumed. And that's why I describe certain government employees as bureaucrats. I was punished for that severely. I find that the mean total nitrogen, and they're in reports that I've given you or reports I've referenced, I find that there's an enormous range between 69 and 88. DEP assumed it was 50. And I started out, I was the first denitrifying system, and in those days, they only gave the approval for 2 years. My first renewal, I was denied. So I appealed it. So I go all the way to Boston, and in front of me, after it appears I'm going to win, I hear, give everybody else from the losing regulator, give everybody else double. I didn't understand what that was, but I woke up to find that 2 of my competitors only have half the soil absorbent system. I can't compete against that, even though I outperform them dramatically. You've heard that before, but my average discharge is like between 13 and 16, and the competing system that their average discharge is 36. They're supposed to be 19. There's been no enforcement action. So the other message I want to make sure you understand is you should be approaching this, and as far as I'm concerned, hell with the regulators. Do the best you can. And I think that what you really have to do is sewer the peninsulas. The reason I say that is your wastewater treatment plant is doing an extraordinary job. I mean, it's discharging less than 2. So I think you should, believe me, DEP has sent a letter out saying that guys like me should look at our system and can I modify it to get down below 10? And yes, I can easily do it because I'm doing it at 2 different places in Falmouth right now. But I look at it is that well, the first thing I did is I said, can I have half the surface area like, the system that doesn't work? Of course not. I'm supposed to do a study that will cost me an estimated $39,000. It's going to take between 3 and 5 years. I'm going to have to prepare a report, prepare an application. It goes to Boston. They publish it in the public note in one of their reports, and then I'm supposed to wait. Then my attitude is, you gave it to the other 2 for nothing, free. I outperformed them, so I don't understand why I'm not treated the same. I should have gone to the Ethics Commission, but I do have a health condition, and the thought of going to Boston on a bus is just not my cup of tea. And I testified before the land court, so I have gone up to Boston in 2022, so I know what it would be like. So my point is that attenuation does exist. You should have whatever engineer you pick understand that attenuation exists, and let's sewer the peninsulas. And as far as I'm concerned, don't pump any more to the highest point of land in Falmouth. Build a new system somewhere down at a much lower elevation. And as far as I'm concerned, the technology that exists at the plant is excellent, and I take my hat off to the town because you've done a great job of that.
Thank you, Mike.
I'll be happy to answer any question.
Well, I'm going to, if I can just jump in. I've heard you talk before about the difference in the actual nitrogen in the system versus what the state says. And I've also heard you give your talk on attenuation before. And one of the thoughts that occurred to me is we take the numbers that you've been seeing in the septic systems and other people are seeing, and you apply attenuation, you start to get back to pretty close to the number that the state says to use, but don't apply any attenuation. And so there's some breakdown in the science and the models. We've more than once gone back to the MEP, which if we start changing what the state thinks is happening in septic systems, that changes the amount of nitrogen that we then have to find and remove. So I think we're more knowledgeable than the folks at the state, but as you've pointed out, changing the state's mind or making them revisit all of this is pretty much a running into the wall situation.
I have to be careful what I say, but I did nominate a certain 2 employees at the state level to be granted honorary PhDs in bureaucracy. I had a relationship with a certain college, and they were not happy with me on that. So I'm just want to, yes, I have talked in 2022 about total nitrogen, and I touched on attenuation. So I just wanted to reiterate it because there seems to be some, there are some reports out there that, that talk about attenuation, but I got different numbers. But attenuation does exist, and I know there's a certain group of regulators that say it's very limited, but it does exist. So,
Thank you, Mike. Excellent. Second item on the agenda is the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center's urine diversion pilot initiation suggestions. Little update for everybody. We are at the point where the town manager and others have engaged with the test center, and they're working on developing a memorandum of understanding to utilize the test center, sort of to manage the project. And they came to a meeting, I did not attend the meeting, but Test Center came in with 15 items that they talked about for project planning and preparation needs. And I just shared it with the rest of, with all the board members here. But I think at this point here, as we go forward, what we're gonna see is that the test center is gonna be the lead on some of this stuff, and that, as we've talked a couple of times, it was unclear whether the DPW would have to run it or somebody else would have to run it. We as a board don't have contracting
No.
authority, so it's always gonna either be somebody else. So we made some progress in the sense that the town manager and others feel the test center is the best entity to handle and manage this, and that's where it is at this time. We also have Amy sent along, as everybody knows, to the DEP, both the working group's recommendations on the study as well as the initial proposal. We have not heard anything back from them yet. I don't take that as a negative or a positive, it's just the pace at which they're working. So that's where we're at with that. I didn't want to have people wonder, you know, where is this, what's going on, who's on first type thing. I know there was a back and forth with questions to the finance committee, and that answers got back to the finance committee, and I do believe the finance committee, as reported, recommended indefinite postponement and have it come back in the fall as more things get answered by the test center's overall management of the project. So, anybody else have anything they want to add in here? Anybody in the audience? Okay.
I'm sorry, Steve, just as a point of.
You need to go to the microphone, okay, and identify yourself. I know who you are.
I know.
But not everybody at 2 in the morning who's watching Falmouth Community Television will know who you
I'll
are.
send them a sympathy card if they are. Peter Hargraves, Precinct 9, and I'm on the Finance Committee, and we had that vote, and it's public information that we voted indefinite postponement. But the point of order that I raised my hand on was that it's possible that the fall is a time to address this, but I don't think we put it, as we were discussing it, we're not the technical experts, but we found a lot of issues, and some of them were illuminated by comments on the Water Quality Management Committee, and it may take more than 6 or 9 months to resolve those. So the point of order is we need to answer those questions before and so that we can be qualifying an IA system alternative instead of just doing a project to see how much nitrogen we can keep out of the soil. So I guess if we're going to spend money, it better be useful for something. And so that's just my point of order, that's all.
Thank you, Peter. Next on the agenda is a presentation by Kristen. I think over the last several meetings, more than once, somebody's questioned if lots are big enough for IA systems or not. And Kristen's done a good sort of initial, what's the scale on this issue? Is it
Okay,
overwhelming or not? So,
Kristen Rathjen, Science Wares. So what this is this stemmed from some of the conversations as we were looking at some of the watershed elements of would certain areas that are identified as septic improvement areas be ideal candidates for IA systems, knowing that it's a larger system and will it fit in the lot size? So this is, as Steve said, basically the initial cut at a screening tool to try and help guide those recommendations as you're working through watershed plans. Steve had a conversation with one of the local septic installers who gave him some generic numbers on requirements for IA systems, particularly nitro in this case. So the numbers that I got through hearsay are for up to a 3-bedroom home, Size for a leach field, 28 by 12. The tanks, another 6 by 11.5. Adding a little conservative buffer for some piping. And then including additional setbacks, so you have lot line setbacks, distance from building setbacks, so an additional 10 feet on all sides to give you a very conservative area of what you might need for a septic system for that size home, gives you a 32 by 60 footprint, or 1,920 square feet. For a 4-bedroom home, you have a larger leach field, so you have a larger area, so 2,200 square feet. So I'm going to walk through a mock scenario. In this case, this is a 4-bedroom home on almost a half an acre. So fitting in 1,920 square feet should be an easy fit. But there are plenty of other considerations on each parcel that need to be considered. Each parcel has your building footprint. It has driveways, patios, pools, and decks. So all of these features on a parcel impact where you can put a septic system. So one of the things that we looked at, again, taking the conservative number, this conservative area for septic systems. So this is that example of a 4-bedroom home. Here's an image of that parcel with the structures on it. So not all septic systems have to be put in a straight line. There is some leeway with how you work the system. But again, this is meant to be a very generic, broad screening tool. So you can see the 70 by 32 that you would need for a system could fit on the lot. You would probably have enough clearance there with the driveway. If you look at it from just the components itself and have your setbacks at different places, you can look at it from that perspective too. This is a terrible picture, but what it is showing, because I zoomed in super far, is that there's other considerations that we can't pick up from just looking at the parcel and the features. This is a giant tree, this is a giant tree, and there's a giant tree over here. So you have some of the natural features on the lot that will need consideration as well. All right, so then at the beginning I said how much open space you need as a conservative number. So what I did was I took all of these features on the parcel and I basically subtracted out to get the area of the negative space on a parcel. So GIS calculates what your square footage is per parcel. And I did this for single-family residents. I did not do it for commercial or multifamily because the regulations are different for those. So these are only for single-family homes. So if I take those minimum requirements, so the 1,920 square feet for up to a 3-bedroom home or the larger size for a 4-bedroom home, and I ask the GIS to identify parcels that don't meet that minimum requirement. You can see for this particular area of town, the parcels that are highlighted in yellow are 3-bedroom homes, up to 3-bedroom homes that don't have at least 1,920 total square feet available on the lot. And the orange ones are for the 4 or more bedroom homes. So what this is, again, is it's broad and it's general. That doesn't mean an IA can't fit, because the next thing is these purple locations are ones where there are IAs installed. So if you look, this one is a flagged one and this one is a flagged one, and both of those do have systems currently on it. What it looks like for the South Coast when I apply it, you can see pretty much all of the peninsulas have shown, have not made it through the filter. And that's just one more reason why there's talks of sewering the peninsulas, because almost every lot on those peninsulas comes up under those filters as potentially not having enough space. That was all.
Reaction?
Well, I mean, I think I initially suggested to Kristen we might need to worry about it. I think your analysis shows, yeah, we probably do need to worry about it. Because you had identified some, in one of the watershed plans, some areas, especially around Israel's Cove, I think, where, that was the specific area I was thinking about.
This is Israel's
Yeah.
Cove.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, you might not be able to just assume that you can put an IA on every house.
Correct, correct. And if you end up with images like this where you're looking, it's telling you to figure something else out.
Right. So that's also kind of matches what Mike was saying earlier, is this is probably the place to put the sewers.
And as refinements go along for plans, these numbers, these filtering criteria can certainly be adjusted. You know, it's a pretty simple thing once all of that was built into the GIS system. Modifying that is easy.
And I think my last comment would be, I know you also started to look at groundwater depths, and that's another possible impediment. But you haven't included that in this analysis, correct?
I can just layer that right on.
I think another, I don't want to call it a nail in the coffin, but we are looking underground here, and IA systems recently seem to have gone up quite a bit in estimated cost. And then on top of that, you've got operational and maintenance costs that I can't foresee going down either. So from an economic standpoint, even though sewers, the upfront capital cost is going to be quite a bit more, I think, long-term. That's another point in favor of sewering these peninsulas. I just think it's a combination of things coming together that really say, we've got to sewer them.
Now, I think one of the things we wanted, this is obviously reinforcing the need for sewering, and especially in our very small lot, densely populated South Coast areas. Martha's Vineyard, Tisbury is already enforcing some Title V in anticipation of the state mandate that has not hit the vineyard yet. So it'll be interesting going forward to see how their experience is with this type of an issue around Lagoon Pond and those areas that are mandated now by the local entity. And also, to Tom's point, what's it costing them? I'm seeing numbers in the vineyard press of, $40,000 to $50,000, and they're, even though it's a small scale, a relatively limited number of properties, they're having trouble getting enough contractors and hardware to make that happen. Back to Ken's point about last meeting's presentation on the issue of spacing from the groundwater, the 9 feet that Falmouth has with the recent rules installed by the Board of Health. My concern is, with some of these peninsulas, we're looking at 20-year plus plan for actually designing, funding, and building sewers. In this interim, 20 years or more, those properties that are too close to the water table are putting a excessive amount of nitrogen into the estuaries that we're trying to clean up. And I think as a community, we need to think about that, particularly from the Board of Health, as to how do we maybe try to regulate that and make things happen quicker in properties that are really hammering the estuaries or appear to be based on the rules that are in place. To me, that's, we can sewer, but eventually, by the time we get to some of these estuaries, they may be so further degraded that, recovery might not be possible in any reasonable time frame. So, kind of a philosophical point.
Yeah, to the statement that an IA system is $35,000 to $40,000, I want to temper that a little bit. If you have a cesspool and you have to put in, a tank, the nitrification, denitrification step, and the leach field, yeah, that's the big number. Most of these homes have Title V systems, so you're plugging something in to that system, not ripping it out and putting a whole new system in. So the cost to do the plug-in is probably in the $15,000 or a little bit more, depending upon where the space is and how you can get around, okay? I'll get to you in a second. I'm just gonna go down the board, Mike.
But, just, if I may, that's why I think it's important to keep in communication with these other communities that are already starting to walk the walk.
Yep.
And see
Yeah, I just-
what's your actual
I
experience.
just wanted to caution,
Yep,
the
yep.
40,000, the
Yep.
40,000 number keeps getting kicked around out
Yep.
there. That's if you don't have anything that's even close to Title V right now. You don't have a leach field or anything else.
Yep.
You know, most of what we're looking at for places that might get this pushed on them already have something in place. So it's slightly, it's still a number and it's still a cost,
Yep.
but it's not 40,000 for everybody.
And the other point is, even a properly operating, well-designed IA system is going to still be leaving nitrogen in the groundwater, whereas the sewering is
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah.
pretty efficient.
Right.
I know it's not 100%, but that's the other trade-off here too, is if we go with IAs, you're still gonna be loading those areas right at the edge of the water with some amount of nitrogen that we shouldn't be putting there.
A while back, I think I passed out to everybody kind of what I think I called them like the, facts or whatever. Like how much credit you get for consumption of this and that. Whenever I look at those numbers, I just have this little thing in my head that says, you sewer a three-bedroom home, you remove a certain amount of nitrogen. You put IAs in, you have to do 2 homes to get to the
Right, yep.
same number as sewering 1 home for nitrogen reduction.
I guess I had 2 thoughts. One of them is, if you could just remind me, because I know we've talked about it in the committee before, how does that cost for an IA compare to a Title V? For like if you're starting from a cesspool?
Mike's sitting out there, he's probably designed things, but my sense is it's $10,000 more to put an IA system in over a conventional Title V system, because you got the leach field, you got the septic tank and everything, there's a plug-in module in the middle
So
of
it's not-
some sort. Okay, Mike, you wanted to talk. You're still Mike McGrath, so you don't have to re-identify yourself.
I wanted to say that one thing I forgot to bring up was that there's another way of protecting estuaries, and that's putting in PRBs. I know there's one PRB that exists in Falmouth, but I don't know what the test results are. So you ought to publish, what the results are inside and outside of the PRB. Because I actually recommended to a tiny town in another state that, has little tiny lots like this, that I thought the only thing they could do is PRBs.
I'm going to cut you off because I want to keep the meeting moving. We've covered PRBs extensively. We're currently pursuing a location out in the Wacoit area to get funding for a larger scale PRB to cover several homes.
I know that we recommended that one be put in a portion of West Falmouth Harbor. I don't know if you ever put it in. And the other point is that I did put a limited one in Penzance, and I'll go look at it. So anyways, that's,
That information back.
all right, thank you.
Any other comments from the public on this sort of screening tool? I will say, having sat on the Board of Health for a number of years, it was pretty common to have somebody come in looking for some variances just on Title V systems, on the setbacks from the sidelines or the house, in which there are things you can do, but we didn't try to get into all those, what can you do to squeeze something on? Just the screening was done at a macro level. Right? As usual, Kristen, excellent, thank you.
I guess I just had one other point, is that when we're talking about IAs here, obviously we're not talking about your diversion because they are not approved yet. But if they were approved under DEP, some of those
Yeah.
Yeah, it changes, yep.
would be more suitable for
Yep.
that kind of technology, so. But I agree that sewering in these densely, populated areas is definitely the way to go in the near term.
Okay. The next item on here is sort of a placeholder that we've got is update on funding opportunities. I participated in a webinar out of Senator Markey's office on basically how do you make a request for pork. And they did a good job of outlining the different sort of elements that are there. A window opens up. You have to fit inside certain programs, agriculture, and not all of that goes through. For example, because we've been in continuing resolutions all this year, none of the other programs have ever gotten to the point of being funded. In listening to all of that and going back at some point, it did occur to me that there's a potential, and again, somebody would have to dig into it, but under the agricultural program, it may be that you could outline some of the urine diversion and where urine would ultimately go to, and there might be some potential for some funding there. They give a lot of money to communities that have to do with more social action type things. There's some infrastructure money, but they consider the money that goes into the SRF funding for, the 0% loans from the state as where that money goes. So it's getting money for sewers or getting money for outfalls. It looks like a very long shot, but it was instructive, and those folks were useful.
So, can I ask a question about that then? Which is, how do we take the next step? I mean, as I think I mentioned to you, I think there might be a need for something that combines affordable housing, 100% affordable housing, with assistance in putting in advanced wastewater. And that seems like it might be politically desirable too. So maybe if you want to advance that, what do you do next?
So at some point in April, they will open a window for people, you have to be a government entity to make a request, okay? Falmouth, to the best of my knowledge, has typically not done this much. Other communities have. So I guess I would say there is a housing committee in town, right? And there is a board of selectmen, and
And there's a wastewater management committee.
yep. I can give you the link, and you can start reading all the regulations for these different programs, okay?
Okay?
It could, I feel like I was taking the first step in the sense that we've not ever, I can't find any indication we've done this. I do a little bit of work in the town of Situate, and Situate seems to have done a fairly successful job of getting some money to fix seawalls and fix some other things where they get, $400,000, $500,000.
So that's an okay range. It doesn't have to be $10 million or something.
No, none of these programs that they identified that they, that Markey's office identified were in the past few years they've gotten, targeted appropriations. None of these were big numbers. I think the biggest one was a $2 million one, and it was
Okay,
a
good.
program in Brockton to put something in place to meet a social need for, what do they call it, environmental, economic justice?
Environmental justice, yeah. So, if I could speak, Steve, for a minute, sort of on two things, one somewhat off track, but leading up to these opportunities, there has to be a fair amount of background chatter among people that are politically connected. And how do we find out about that and tap into that and have somebody send an email or something that these things are coming up? Is this through our congressman's office or somewhere else? Because there must be a network in the background that sees these things coming up and know how the system works.
I will share the link with you of everything I just got.
Okay, good, thanks. And the other thing is some years ago, and I hate to date myself, but I think it might have been 5 years ago, we had a half-day conference that happened to meet at Falmouth Academy of the different boards and committees in town. I see Paul nodding. He said, I think we had a very, very good meeting. It involved the entire select board. It involved affordable housing. It involved us. And I thought it was a very fruitful way to get together and see what kind of synergies we might develop peer-to-peer across these different groups. And maybe we could get the ball rolling and have another one of these before summer gets here, and at least have some ideas of how we might, in particular, Ken got me thinking about this, talking about the housing aspect of it. Because we could tie together and maybe there would be power in numbers. Anyway, just kind of a soft thought there.
Well, I would say we did a little scramble through December and January involving the DPW and the natural resource folks to go after some money having to do with drainage and fish
Yeah.
items, and that's where we
Right.
put in that for that PRB. So that was, a little bit of that came together through the office of the town manager.
Yeah.
And maybe it's worthwhile to let them, I would encourage you and Paul to, since you both participated before, to say it was a great thing and you hope it happens again.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, reports of members, go ahead.
Before we leave funding opportunities, I think, we've talked about some of the other grants potentials. I think the town manager has picked a direction which I think makes a whole bunch of sense to partner with Mass Tech on the whole project of urine diversion. An important part of that, I think, is and that we have talked about, and I think, Brian Horsley, he's not here, but has mentioned, they want to go after grants. But the time is now. The SNP thing is out there with a deadline of April 5th, I think, for a letter of interest or a letter of intent. And going through that, 20-odd pages, there are, I think, potential in there for things like urine diversion. Kristen had pointed out in an email to all of us about there's a paragraph that says, well, they won't fund anything that's in private homes, buildings, and businesses, except if it's an innovative project that may have widespread application. And reading that, I say, oh, urine diversion. And I know Brian was in I think a call with you, or a webinar of some sort just recently, wasn't it, Kristen, on SNP?
Yes. That was the one that highlighted that criteria about not doing septic installations for private homes.
Right. So is there,
It was a very basic one. It was mostly geared toward people who have never gotten funding through the SNP program, so there really wasn't any new information that came from that.
well, I think, the people that have experience in this are the people that are going to be key in the project, and that's Mass Tech and some of the partner groups that they have worked with and plan to work with going forward. But there are opportunities, I guess my point is there are opportunities in the very near future that if you don't say at least try, well, you let that one go and got to hope for the next one, so.
And just say that you and I think you know this, Kristen, that you can call SNAP, you can talk to the program manager, and you can ask if the specific idea you have is going to meet the criteria. They'll tell you.
So this is, I'm walking a little tightrope here, that the town manager and others have gone down the path of doing a memorandum of, working up a memorandum of understanding with SMAS. So if somebody's gonna go after the SNAP, that SNAP grant, it sounds to me
should be
like
that.
it's them, because it's a county thing.
Absolutely.
So
We could give them advice, though. I mean, maybe
Suggestion.
if they're not familiar with the SNAP process, I know,
I think they've
We
gotten grants in the
are.
past. They've gotten grants in the past.
oh, okay.
So they should be very familiar with the process, and hopefully, again, I'm not sitting in the room with whatever they're doing, but if the town is putting up a certain block of money to them, that's a matching in-kind amount, and
That'd be
the
perfect.
test center should be smart enough at this point to be putting a SNP grant, or a SNP application together in early April that will turn that.
Right.
That upfront money into 2 or 3 times the number that.
I,
Potentially, yeah. It's-
But-
I think
but-
it
but-
would
but
be a
we're
good
not-
fit.
We're not, we're out of the game a little bit.
Of writing it, yes,
Okay?
yeah, yeah. But I like your point about the town match, because they do require a match, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Follow up on that. Do I still need to go to that workshop tomorrow, webinar on the SNP? If, like, are we planning on applying to something else other than
I
this
do-
mass
I-
tech
we haven't
diversion?
identified anything else that we would do, have we?
That's not just SNP, that's like Massachusetts, here are other funding opportunities beyond SNP. It's SNP that's hosting the webinar.
Oh, okay. So, yes, I
Sorry.
should still go.
Yes,
Good,
yeah,
good,
it'd be
good.
great if you could, yeah.
Yep. I just wanted to make sure if we weren't gonna apply, I didn't need to go to the webinar.
Right.
But yes, I will definitely attend. Thank you.
Move on to reports of members and staff. I'm going to take a moment here. First off, if they've published when the precinct meetings will be, if anybody's got an interest in covering any item or going to them, if they're not already a town meeting member, I can share with you the dates on that. The other one is, there's a thing called the Wacoit Bay Landing Stormwater Project Public Meeting. And it says they want input. There's a virtual meeting via Zoom on 10 a.m. on the 27th of March. And again, I'll pass this around. Anybody wants to jump in and understand it more? I think you might know something about this.
Yes, I can send around the flyer so everyone has the link.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Great,
give
thank
them
you.
time to get to it. Kristen thinks that I like traveling, so she's told me about something that's gonna be in June on Long Island about the 2024 Clean Water Symposium. Again, we'll pass this around if anybody's got an interest in going to Long Island and seeing what they're doing on Long Island. I just keep
I might do that.
yeah, I'm just keeping that information out there for everybody, all right? I would like to do a brief update on where we're at with the outfall effort. For those of you who do or don't know that, we have, our consultant is on board. GZA is the consultant on marine borings. And they're doing what I would call the engineering, technical side of it. Buzzards Bay Coalition offered to act as a point person on what I would call the political outreach component of the whole project. Corin has so far arranged 2 meetings. She and I met with Dylan Fernandez on the 5th, just to, bring him up to date on where the town is with the whole overall program, and let him know that, with regards to the outfall, we would like to be able to get permission to do the marine borings next fall, get through a couple of permitting agencies, and not lose a whole year on the permitting or getting the outfall together. He said, the town's in support of the outfall, he's in support. When we start putting things in, just keep his office informed, which was good. We then had a very productive call on the 8th with a person named Todd Callaghan. And he is actually at the EEO, and he is the real point person at CZM for all of this. And it was a very helpful meeting in terms of
How do you spell his name?
Callagahon. And we talked about where we're at with going down the path of getting permits and things that we need for the marine borings. And he had several insights into the overall program and the permitting steps, and we even talked a little bit further in terms of the overall outfall. So she's going to continue to work on setting up, just informational with various, Keating's office and others, so that they're aware of what we're doing and where we're going. I'm done with my reports.
Has there been any outreach to Martha's Vineyard to let them know exactly what our plans are and what the advantages are and everything else? Because there's a little chatter going on right now. It's very diffused, it's background, but there's already some noise.
Yeah, so recently I got, we got an email from somebody who's on the Martha's Vineyard, help me out, Kristen, is it the commission? Commission. And I suggested that we would love to hear from them what they're doing and to help inform them about what we're doing.
Right, good.
That's correspondence over the last week or so. I haven't closed the
Okay,
loop on that
this was
one.
some time ago that was being talked about, late fall, early winter.
Mm-hmm.
Some stuff came across my email and stuff about, anyway.
Ask a question.
Go ahead.
Just to update myself and the rest of us, the first study that had to be done or was being done on the impact to the groundwater of pumping several million gallons out into the ocean, any update on the status of that? Still expected for later this year? Or?
Yeah, they just got started they just literally got started in January. We have not had a formal update from them. We have, on Friday, I will participate with Amy, we'll talk with our consultants about various items, and I'm sure we'll do a little check off there, but to the best of my knowledge, they are working on it.
So by the end of the year?
Yeah, they've got to construct, do some modifications to their existing model, and then they've got to run 2 scenarios and validate them. We expected, I think, Amy, as I recall, your timetable was 5 to 6 months before they would be at the point where they had run the model and had some results that were then going to have to get, proofed by somebody before they were final.
I missed, who's doing that study?
Say it again?
Who is doing
USGS.
that?
The USGS,
Oh, yeah, okay.
yeah. They got skin in the game.
What does a failure case look like in that groundwater model?
You, do me a favor, walk to the microphone and identify yourself, because we are on television now.
John Kaufman, East Falmouth. What does a failure case look like for the groundwater modeling study of the Sagamore lens due to this outfall pipe?
Yeah, the failure would be if their analysis concludes that taking sewerage out of the peninsulas to go to an ocean outfall causes a decrease in the Sagamore lens.
So a rise in the seawater, freshwater interface?
Right.
It's more that the Sagamore lens, so, well, knowing the interest that you have, I should get you a copy of the report that USGS has done so far on the Mara Vista Peninsula, where they looked at what happened to the groundwater table once people went on the sewer on that peninsula. But the first read is that, sewering the peninsulas will not affect the scale of the lens up above, but we need to prove that out. Amy?
Amy Lowell, wastewater superintendent. I just would say that I don't think a failure scenario has been established. I think the USGS was going to model this and say what the results of that are, and then we talk with then the regulators and the town talk about what that means. So we didn't talk about a failure scenario. We just talked about the evaluation, and we'll look at the results and see what the impact looks like.
Maybe failure is one of those sort of third rail sort of words sometimes. But, the background goes back a ways, probably 20 or 30 years ago, when on Long Island, people started getting concerned about the aquifer on Long Island and the demand on the aquifer and how the wastewater outfalls were impacting that aquifer. This is a different scale. We still need to prove that, and it's not, the design number is like 1.7 million at this point, if everything got sewered, so.
And what fraction of that is the annual recharge of the Sagamore lens? It's a very tiny fraction. I think John Waterbury did
John did some stuff,
some quick and dirty stuff, no pun intended with dirty, And it's a very, very tiny fraction of the total recharge of the lens. But I don't remember the numbers, but I remember his quick thing, it was tiny.
Yeah.
The
Well,
anticipation.
when the USGS folks get a little further along, we probably should do another little
Right.
walkthrough with, you know, what's the ongoing recharge rate? As Amy was going through, working with their scope, they had conversations and they had some different numbers, but the simple thing I got to was realizing that the Sagamore lens is exiting via the Childs River and the Coonamessett River and the Quashnet River. And that if you look at what's in those rivers, you know, that's sort of the lens. And that for years, we've been pumping out of that lens for our water supply and sending the water onto these peninsulas. And we've actually raised the sort of localized lenses on the peninsulas up.
The southern
And
extension
so
of the lens,
we've
yeah.
been basically discharging that flow already into the estuaries. Okay? So I'm more than cautiously optimistic. I'm optimistic that the USGS study will not suddenly make us have to slam on the brakes and say, we're back to groundwater discharge.
Yeah. That's certainly my sense of things.
Yeah, I think that's the indication of everything, but I think it's an important step that you had outlined back in the beginning of my involvement with the committee, that this is a go, no-go stopgate.
Yeah.
That we have to get by that hurdle before we can proceed with the other permitting and actual borings and et cetera, et cetera. One last question, if I may, on the outfall. You had directed the engineering folks to lay out the best route for.
Yeah, they haven't got that far.
Haven't
into it.
started yet.
They haven't got that far into it.
Yep.
No, we're still working trying to work up who we have to go get permits from and how. Okay. Any other committee reports?
No.
Water quality monitoring, you guys,
I haven't gotten back to it.
Making
Sorry.
progress.
My apologies.
you're making progress.
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
I guess I have a little bit of an update in that I talked to Matteo Handley's group, he's been involved in setting up.
Surf riders?
Yes, Surf Riders chapter on Cape Cod. I talked to the person managing the Blue Water Task Force today. And sort of what we decided, since, they're interested in helping with water quality monitoring, not just in Falmouth, but sort of across the board, was to link them up with Cape Cod Commission and SMAST to see if they could put some of their volunteers towards some of that ongoing monitoring right now. But they're very interested in, staying connected and getting more involved in some of this monitoring going forward. So that was good.
Moving right along. Minutes?
I don't know, before the minutes, do we want to ask if there's any commentary from
Sure.
attendees?
Any commentary from the assembled distinguished citizens of the great town
Oh,
of
okay,
Falmouth?
good. I think we should probably add that on as a regular agenda thing, just if people,
I'm gonna-
have a comment period.
I'm gonna think
How
about
much
that one.
time do you
Okay.
have
I'm gonna
in the
think about that
evenings,
one.
Tom? How much time in the evenings do you have?
I don't, but I just wanted to make sure that people felt welcome to comment on.
Yeah,
I haven't noticed much reticence in
I
the
mean,
public.
my personal preference is to be open and let people speak to items that are on our agenda to talk about.
Right.
And if somebody wants to add something to our agenda, it's easy enough to reach us through our email address.
Yes.
And say, we think this is something that your committee should be working on, and we, like McGrath, 2 or 3 times, anyone come in and talk about things, and we
Yep.
found a slot for him, so we're not denying people the opportunity
Yeah.
to come and speak, but,
Actually, that reminded me, Steve, next meeting, we're expecting Kristen from the Wacoit Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve to speak. And so that'll be also sort of relevant to the water quality
yep,
conversation as well.
yep, okay. Peter?
Well, you guys are asking for some love, so I'm here to give it, Thank you. Actually, it goes back to Kristen's great presentation on the suitability of those lots for IA systems. And immediately I started thinking, as we sewer all those areas that must be sewered, the questions I have, it may show my ignorance in this area. Will that, if we sewer all that, will it deliver, expected to deliver the TMDLs that we are targeting? And then otherwise, outside that area in the same watershed, as we consider the need for IA systems where there are no sewers, have we done a similar map of those residential properties? And, because I thought, whoa, if all these criteria come into play, we may not be able to meet the TMDLs in some watersheds if there's a constraint all the way through the watershed.
So let me try to bring you up to speed on where we're at. A number of these presentations are targeted at the fact that we're going to go out and have to prepare watershed plans, 14 of these. So Kristen's been picking off different items to understand them a little bit, so that when we go out and retain somebody to create these 14 plans, we can infuse the scope of work of what we want them to do, to say things like, look at this, or compare this, or do that. We're not trying to do all 14 of the estuaries right now for lot sizes. We have concluded, though, early on, that even if we sewer some of these estuaries, particularly the south coastal, the bigger estuaries, Peter, we are going to have to develop a rule that says thou wilt have to upgrade to an IA if you fall inside this area, because it's not going to be sewered, but we need to get X kilograms more nitrogen out of the system. So I've been kicking around a number between 3,000 and 4,000 residences in the community, beyond what we sewer, are probably going to have to put some type of IA in over the next 20 years.
So these are all threads, and the cloth will be woven in the analysis, and then we'll say, well, in this watershed, it looks like we need to do a lot of IA work, or none over here, that.
These will be definitive plans, yep.
Thank
And
you.
the other thing that has bearing on Kristen's analysis is, as you cross Route 28 and head north, the average lot size goes up dramatically.
Right.
So the physical limitations on IAs that were so important in these peninsulas is not going to be as big a factor. Just off-the-cuff kind of remark there. It's going to
Yeah.
be a
Thank
different.
you, thank you.
And also the efficiency of building sewers goes down because
Right.
the distances you have to put pipe in are larger.
Yeah.
so, per house,
Good.
right?
Now, this is,
Jenkins Pond, she pointed out.
There are exceptions, of course,
Yeah,
yeah,
but you still have to get the main to Jenkins Pond.
yeah.
Now, this usually takes us quite a bit of time when we get to the minutes.
Oh.
But we want to get our number one technical
What
expert
am I
out of
gonna
here
do with all my spare
before
time
6
now?
o'clock. So,
Yeah.
if we need to, table that till the next meeting on the minutes, otherwise we can do our best. Where are you at, Tom?
I like the way they look, but usually people have one or two, and John Waterbury's not here. He usually has one or two things. I did see one mistake that I missed before, Kristen, that I will bring to your attention. I don't care how many times you read these things. But anyway, I'll see you
And if
after
you
the
didn't
meeting.
wait
It's
till
only
the
one
last
little.
minute.
It's one little very simple thing that I just happened to notice today. Anyway.
Any other comments?
So I'll
on the
move,
minutes?
I'll move approval of the minutes as presented.
Hold on a second, I was just asking, are there any other comments on the minutes?
I think they were great.
Okay.
Well, I have to move it technically before they can comment if you follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Who's Robert? Is he on
He's
this
not
committee?
here, he's outside the room.
Is he the chair?
But I'm a stickler. But yeah, technically, the motion is supposed to be moved, and then there's discussion.
Make a motion.
I did, I tried to, but I got cut off.
Anybody want to second that motion that he tried to make?
Second.
All right.
So-
Is there any further comment?
Discussion.
Discussion on the motion.
No,
Discussion on the motion.
hearing no discussion.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? let's make it unanimous.
Yes.
And you can get some food before you go to that concert.
And earplugs.
Although you may not want to go into the concert with a full stomach, I don't know.
Whoa!
we just vote on the minutes or?
Yes.
Or adjourning?
No, we
Wait,
didn't do
wait,
adjourning, you
Okay.
can,
I'm waiting for a motion to adjourn. You want to make
yeah,
a motion?
well, this, you've got to make something.
Well,
Move we adjourn.
yeah, okay.
Any second?
I feel badly, but
I'll
I have to
second it.
abstain on the
Okay,
minutes.
there's been a motion made and seconded to adjourn. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
Aye.